with basically the next big questions. It's basically entrepreneurship is just continuously getting to the next question of what am I doing next? I'd love to say there's a playbook. It's just a lot of questions.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the What You Don't Hear podcast. This is a life podcast. It's a story podcast. It's a bit of an open journal dive into people's lives as I sit and uncover the real story behind my guest's journey up to this point, finding out what makes them them, and sharing the parts of their story that we otherwise wouldn't get to hear. Who am I? Well, I am your host. My name is Ross Theisen. I am a filmmaker, a creative director, a freelancer of all kinds. But of course, in this case, I'm a podcaster. And quite frankly, I love to talk to people a whole lot. So I have an amazing episode for you this week and an amazing guest. But before we do that, I need to first remind you that this podcast is brought to you by Promo West Productions. That's right. I've got some sponsors around here helping me keep the lights on. And right now I've got some awesome shows to share with you that are coming your way via Promo West. So if you're interested in catching a live show, you can check out one of these upcoming concerts at Newport Music Hall this May. So they've got Saba on May 4th, Lauren Sanderson on Friday, May 6th, Omar Apollo on Saturday, May 7th, and Black Pistol Fire on May 10th. So if you want to purchase tickets, you can visit axs.com. Or for more info on these shows or any other ones coming up, because there's a lot happening, you can visit promowestlive.com. So once again, to grab tickets, visit axs.com. Or for more info in general on these shows or any other ones in the pipeline, you can visit promowestlive.com. So this week, it's one of my new favorite episodes. I get to sit down with Kathryn Dougherty, the owner and founder of Spritz Tea. There is just so much that I could say about this conversation. It's a fun one. Kathryn tells a great story. It's filled with some really solid life and business advice. I genuinely feel like I made a new friend in this conversation, and really, what more could you want? So without further ado, I'll let the conversation speak for itself. So let's dive in. Here's episode 56 of What You Don't Hear and the story of Kathryn Dougherty.
Go back to the silent film.
Yes. I'll just take the stills.
It's the modern podcast.
Yes. This is the new wave of podcasting. You actually don't need to listen to it. We need to get people reading again. Yeah. That's what we need.
Yes.
So it'll just be photos of us talking, and then we'll just have the captions pop up.
I think it's a great idea.
I think it's perfect. Well, maybe we get a practice episode in now.
Sounds great.
Does that sound good to you? We'll do a practice normal podcast.
Normal one, just a warm up.
Where we can just sit and chat for real. And then I can convert that later. I'll get all the audio out of there. Amazing. And we'll just dive in. Kathryn, thank you so much for doing this.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I am very, very stoked we got to make this happen. You have been someone on my list of potential guests for some time now, honestly.
Thank
you. And
you.
I was like, you know what? Now's the time. I just need to reach out and see if we can make this happen. And I'm glad that we did. Because I feel like there's so much, obviously we're meeting for the first time, so we don't really know anything about each other. But there's definitely so much that I want to know about Spritz and how you got it started and all this sort of stuff, because I've seen it around everywhere for years. I really have. I see it popping up everywhere. And I'm always like, okay, this is like a dope local company and blah, blah, blah. So I'm stoked that we are actually getting to sit down, and now I'm going to uncover the story of Spritz.
Yeah.
As long as you feel like sharing it.
The mythology.
The mythology of. So honestly, even jumping straight into that, how did Spritz even get started? What's the story?
Yeah, so the actual, if you guys have heard, food and beverage founder stories before, they often have a similar kind of origin story where you sort of solve your own problem, kind of, at home in a kitchen, and that was the case for me as well. So it was 2016. I was training for my first half Ironman. Most of my friend network were other women who were also in the same triathlon group as me. So we all, swam together, biked together, ran together. But we also loved getting together on Friday nights for dinner parties because getting a bunch of your friends around a dining room table, having that community, and being able to just sort of, celebrate what went well in your week, support each other in what didn't go well in your week, and just sort of gather together was really meaningful to all of us. And having like that great experience, having this, beautiful dining room table and, 2 forks and cloth napkins and kind of the whole sort of experience that we always loved to pull together, always felt a little bit incomplete without something kind of fancy to drink. But because we all got up really early Saturday mornings to go run long distances, most of us were not consuming alcohol. It just was not a great option for training plans. And so we'd kind of sit down to this, girls' dinner party, and then we just kind of have like water in our glasses, and water's great, gotta hydrate, but it's just not kind of the same as a beautiful piece of glassware with something pretty in it and, maybe some bubbles. And I was thinking about that one night as I got ready for the dinner party that I was hosting. That time it was my turn to host. And I was just like, gosh, like there's gotta be some way to make something bubbly, that looks pretty in a glass, that tastes interesting, that doesn't have sugar, that we can all enjoy and sort of have as this like special part of the evening that still meets our requirements for kind of the goals we have around training. And I still am a big tea drinker. And I thought, gosh, what if I just like made a concentrate and chilled it and mixed in some sparkling water and a little juice? Like, what would happen? I was like a little scientist in my kitchen. And that's the first time I made a concept of Spritz, was literally a concentrate of hibiscus tea with some sparkling water, I think a little lemon and lime juice. And I put it in this really pretty glass pitcher. It was this beautiful pink color. And I served it to my friends in wine glasses, and it literally looked like a champagne or like a sparkling rosé. It looked exactly like that in the glass, but it was just tea. And so we all felt really special. And then the next morning we ran really far, and none of us had hangovers. So
Right,
it was like
that's
win-win.
a plus. Yes.
Yeah, that was the first moment.
Wow. Okay. So I feel like that just spawns so many questions. Like, one, like, what? That's so interesting to me that like it was sort of that thing where you were like, okay, I see this need for this thing. Like, did you investigate like, hey, are there options out there that exist? And you were like, okay, I'm just not finding something, that then led you to be like, okay, I'll just make it myself.
Absolutely. I mean, because if you think about, again, in 2016 especially, the options were like a sparkling water, which is great, but it's not the most flavorful. There are mocktails, but they tend to be very high in like sugar or corn syrup. They just kind of weren't right for us either. Then there's, some other drinks like traditional soda, but a lot of those don't have ingredients we want, and many of them have caffeine, which is not great in the evenings. There just wasn't a lot of like ready to drink, off the shelf, interesting, complex, non-alcoholic alternatives. And I just kept being like, how is there nothing out here that can solve this? And yeah, just kind of decided to attempt to solve it myself.
So where does that even come from? Because I feel like that's like not like a huge leap, but that's an interesting step to take of like, I feel like a lot of people would just be like, oh, this thing doesn't exist. Well, I guess I'll just drink the thing that does and whatever. But it's so interesting to me that you just took the step of like, well, why can't I just try and create something myself? Like, was that a common thing that you did, of just like, let's mix things together and see what they taste like? So you kind of had that there where you were like, I'll just do it again, but in this way, like.
Yeah. I mean, my parents will probably reference the first time I ever did any kind of drink mixing when I was 3 years old, and I mixed orange juice with milk with hot chocolate, and that did not prove out super well for me.
Great.
It was foul. I can actually still remember it. That might be one of my earliest memories, is how gross that was.
Is that going to be a new Spritz flavor?
It's
sometime
definitely
soon?
not the chocolate orange juice milk.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. Oh, also I warmed it up too, because I was like,
good.
it's hot chocolate, so it should be warm. So it was warm milk with warm orange juice and warm chocolate.
Nothing's better than a warm drink.
I feel like I'm really destroying my credibility as a beverage entrepreneur right now.
Hey, you know what? If you think about it later and you want me to edit it out, we can take it out, you
No,
know?
this is great. You should definitely leave this in. Everyone can just know they don't always have to have been born with this gift.
Everybody starts somewhere.
Everybody starts somewhere.
And sometimes it's mixing hot chocolate, milk, and orange juice.
You never know.
That is incredible.
But so to answer your question, no, I'm not typically somebody who, in like a kitchen or, any kind of really environment where I'm particularly creative. But it was just, I guess when it comes to sort of nutrition and things I'm really passionate about, like at the time, it was triathlon training, I am more willing to kind of figure out solutions. And my job, I guess, at the time as well was really focused on new product development for medical devices, granted, so nothing near Beverage, but at least understanding and leading the process of how do you create new things, I think probably helped a little bit in the sense of like, oh, I see a problem. Like I could probably solve that somehow.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was at least kind of like the environment that you were in that kind of like added to that. Like, well, hey, I have this idea, but why don't I actually attempt to do something with it? Because I don't think there's ever a time where I'm like, this drink should exist. And I'm like, well, you know what? I'm just going to start pouring stuff together. Like, so yeah, that's so interesting. So I'm assuming it was a hit with everybody when you did it. Yeah.
I mean, actually, yeah, like right off the bat, the first one I ever made was that night and it was really good and everybody loved it. And I mean, for the record, I did try other versions down the road that like were horrible and I was like, that's no fun. But like that original one really worked well and people loved it. And it started to become a thing I did regularly for guests, and not just people who were training, but people just in general who maybe were drinking or just wanted alternatives or wanted something more interesting than water. And then I started taking it to other dinner parties as like my contribution. I was like, here's my tea thing I do.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just became this great little, lots of really good feedback. People loved it. And it just became so much more inclusive then at dinner parties and events where, you could still just have something beautiful in a glass and kind of be part of the experience, especially as women without the questions around like, oh, are you pregnant? Or, any of the number of, questions we get when we're not drinking.
Right.
So
that's so cool. So it kind of became just the thing that you were known for amongst your friends groups and everything of just like
made that tea thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But, so when, and did you kind of keep that one flavor as like the thing, or like did you immediately start like, what else can I do? Or was it just like, I got this one down?
I mean, I definitely like played around with other ones.
Yeah.
Some worked really well. Some were very much not. A lot of the ones we actually have on market today, 3 of them are versions of what I had created at my kitchen.
So cool.
Which is very cool to see kind of come to life.
Wow. So, okay, so you're doing, the tea thing for a while, and you're the person who brings them to the get-togethers and the parties. When does there even become a hint of, okay, maybe I take this tea thing into something else, and what can I develop this into?
Yeah, there is a very, very clear moment in that. So in 2016, it was a big election. And for many of us,
yes.
It was a surprise in results that we weren't expecting.
Yeah.
And, as a woman, I was very, very disappointed with the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like it represented a lot of what is still wrong in the world, which is that we don't see women having the power and influence and respect that they should have. And I remember feeling very angry and very sad and very discouraged about what that outcome reflected about our country and our culture. I acknowledge that if my family hears this, they will have very strong opinions against me. But that is, that's okay to have different opinions. It's important to have different opinions. But for me, that was a very jarring moment. And I just remembered thinking, the world needs to change. We need to have more women in power because to me and for my values, this felt very, very unacceptable of an outcome. And I started really thinking about how can women have more power and what can I be doing to support that? And there's a lot of ways to get power. one of the best ones, is to start a company, to have influence, to have an opportunity to motivate others. And of course, let's be honest, money matters. And if you can successfully build a company, that is a way that you can really start to change the face of people who lead companies, people who build companies, people who run companies, people who exit companies, people who are given capital by VCs to build companies. You can start to be one small change in the makeup of those particular demographics. And I started to think a lot about that, and I was like, you know what, I think for me to be one small part of the kind of change that I want to see, I need to be bolder, and I need to try my hand at this. And yeah, it's great here. I worked at Johnson & Johnson, great company, loved working there, great coworkers, great products. And I could have happily stayed at J&J my whole career. Very easily, slide through the corporate life. But I just knew that if I wanted to try to change things, I needed to be bolder, and I needed to start figuring out how can I in some way be part of that. And that was actually really kind of the spark that said, I want to go be an entrepreneur. I want to build a company. I want to get funding for it. I want to grow it. I want to become somebody who inspires other women to go and build companies. And then eventually I want to exit, and I want to use that money to invest in other women-led companies. That's my goal. And it took me years. I mean, that was 2016 to today. It's been a long time. We're still working towards it, but I'm making strides forward. And it's extremely, extremely motivating to me to continue to do that. So, yeah, that's the moment.
Okay.
Just going to go right into politics.
No, you know what? That's great. It wouldn't be a podcast if it's not brought up at some point, right? I love that. And I love that it wasn't just, oh my goodness, this, not fun situation has happened and it's making me upset and it's making me angry, as well as tons of other people. But I really love that you wanted to do something about it. It wasn't just like, I'm upset, I'm angry, what can I do? What do I do? I guess nothing. Like, I don't know, and that's sometimes a very hard thing to figure out. Like, well, what can I do? Because it's so difficult for, like, especially with things like that are nationwide and in ways trickle effects to worldwide. When, you're just one person or one group of people and you're like, well, what really can I do? But I love that you identified that, well, like, you can do something within your world that can create that ripple effect into possibly other worlds. And I think that that's super important for people to hear. And I love that you identified that.
I think that is so important, is that it's not one person that changes the lives of a million. It's a million people that change the lives of one. And if we can each do our own little teeny tiny part to change culture, that's how it happens. And so I'm a really big believer in that. It's not going to be one president that's going to change our world. It's going to be everybody together doing little small bits that's going to have that happen. And I think we are seeing that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Slowly sometimes.
Yes.
But it's happening.
Yeah, very slowly, but if there's any sort of progress is progress, I suppose. Yes. So yeah, I love that you identified that and you decided, like, okay, I'm just going to do something that I know I'm capable of doing. You didn't, I think in those situations, it's very easy to beat yourself up because it's like you look at, like, the largest goal possible. Of like, oh, well, if I was president, then this would change. And it's like, okay, you put so much weight on your shoulders of, like, just these crazy sometimes ideas and stuff. So I think it's awesome that you genuinely took control of that. Not just took control of, like, okay, what can I do? But you took control of even the way that it can make you feel. Of deciding, like, I'm going to do something, and here's the something that I'm going to do. It's within the world that I'm trying to build for myself, or that I know I'm capable of building myself. And the coolest thing is that you had the product that you could do it with sitting there already. Like, so how long of a phase was it where, like, you get that feeling and you're like, okay, time to do something about it. walk me through, like, what are the next steps like? Is it just like next day run out, LLC branded, like, boom, here it is? Like, what's the next few steps of getting it started like?
So it's kind of funny now in hindsight, because, I'm going through these feelings and I'm like, I mean, it took me a couple of months to really be like, all right, this is what I want to do. Do I want to get politically involved? Do I want to become a volunteer? Do I want to do, because there's so many ways you can affect change. And for me, I ultimately settled on the particular path, obviously, that I've chosen.
I'm so sorry for interrupting you. I just want to dig into that for a second.
Yeah.
So something that I think is so easy to talk about, and I hear it in podcasts all the time, and I'm like, oh, like dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah,
so I want to try here.
Okay.
It's so like in casual conversation, it's like, oh, well, there was this time frame where I wasn't really feeling it and I was kind of upset, didn't know what to do, but then I figured it out and then I started. I'm always interested to dig into like what was someone's psyche, like how were you really feeling like during that time, and what were you doing, like, even during the downtime? Because I asked that of not like a day-to-day, like, were you, in the streets picketing, or not like that, but like, what's even running through your head, and how are you like managing that stress? Because I think it's those windows of time that we really don't get to hear about a lot. Because I think when people are listening to someone's story, you just kind of get to the next goal.
You just magically jump to the next level.
Yes.
It's like, ta-da, I had this brilliant idea.
Yes, but it's
No, that's not at all what happens.
Yeah, it's like that gray area. So again, I'm so sorry for stopping your trajectory of like.
No, I think this is a great idea.
The story, but like.
I mean, I'll tell you very viscerally. I mean, it was 2:00 in the morning, right? Before the election results were called. Yeah, and I was awake on my couch, crying, watching that happen. And I mean, that's how visceral that moment was for me. And the next day I put my white dress on, suffragette white, and I walked into my office, and a bunch of my female coworkers there were all also in white, all in like, just support of, wow, we had all really expected this to be this great day of celebration of a change. And the opposite has occurred, and we've all been kind of feeling like the mat just got ripped out from underneath us. And I mean, for a week or two, all I did was, just read the news and feel depressed. I did not jump into some sort of like brilliant, I'm going to change the world. It was just trying to make sense of it and just trying to understand what happened and how I had so much misunderstood the feelings of the nation, and what had I missed, and what perspective of America was I oblivious to that had made this choice, and trying to understand why. And I spent, quite a bit of time doing that. It definitely did not go from like, election results to I'm going to be an entrepreneur. There was a period of mourning, there was a period of anger. And then you start to think, what do I do now? Like, how do I change? Should I go march? And for me, I was like, I don't know, that just didn't feel right to me. I think that can be really effective, but for me, I was just like, that just doesn't feel like the right one for me. And then I thought, should I get into politics? And I was like, I don't know that that's my skill set. I think sometimes I'm too blunt, and maybe that's not what you should do in politics. And so, that didn't really totally feel right to me. And so I kind of explored a lot of these things, and just again, to dig deep, explore means Googling. So when people are like, oh, I explored it, like it means I was reading on Google, like how to become a local politician. Like those would be my Google keywords.
Yeah, okay.
That's really what I was just trying to understand was, looking at all of these different options and thinking through how have people changed history and changed culture historically. And I just kept reading, and then one day I was listening to the podcast How I Built This with Sarah Blakely, and she talked about her path to entrepreneurship, and just like that night in the election had a moment for me, and just like that first time that I mixed my product together was a moment for me. It was right after a corporate softball game. That is as cliche as it comes. And I was sitting in my car in the parking lot, and my friend had recommended this podcast, and I put it on and I listened to it as I was driving home. And it's a pretty short episode. I think it was like 20 or 25 minutes. And I got home and I literally listened to it again immediately. And it was that next moment of like, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to, like what Sarah Blakely just did for me, inspired me to go build a company and to like grab my power. Sarah Blakely is one of the, I think she's the first self-made female billionaire, I believe is her title. And so that's obviously someone who has power and influence, right? And so for me, I thought about how she had just inspired me to like want to go out and, try and do something like this. And that felt right for me. Because I have a corporate background, I have experience in business, I've developed concepts before, and that felt like the right place for me to use my skill set and my area of expertise to start trying to, look into some of these ways to change sort of the culture. And it was not like an immediate, overnight, oh, here's what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. It was, churning on the news. It was Googling stuff. It was feeling hopeless. It was feeling depressed. It was unsure of what path my life was supposed to take, which, by the way, I still have no idea what path my life is taking. I do not have it all figured out, even remotely. But sometimes things just kind of start to click a little bit in place, and you start to just say like, oh, okay, like I think what I'm supposed to do is go out and try and start a business. I have no idea what business, by the way. I did not think about a beverage company at that time. I just was like, maybe it's entrepreneurship that is waiting for me. Maybe that's the path I'm supposed to go on. And it just kind of gutturally felt right.
Yeah. And so it was trusting that gut feeling.
This gut feeling has not served me wrong.
Yeah. It's interesting when that pops up, because like I think there's a lot of times where it's easy to try and discount that of like, this is just a random feeling I'm having. But I would say far more often than not, my gut feelings are usually I'm like, oh, no, that was correct.
That
like,
was dead on.
Whether it's bad, whether it's good, I'm
Yep.
like, no, I felt that for a reason, and I'm glad I acted on it, or glad I finally gave into that feeling, and whatever.
Yeah, your subconscious is putting something together that your conscious mind has not yet connected.
Yeah, and it's like you have to listen to that.
Yeah.
But it's so easy to look at those things like, this is just a random emotion that I'm feeling right now. This is just something.
Oh yeah.
But it's more than something. It's like a real something.
Yeah, and I mean, you feel it, right? It's that pit in the stomach when it's bad. It's that butterfly and that kind of like lift in your heart when it's good. It's those same internal feelings. They just sort of manifest a little bit differently. But each time you feel them really strongly, I mean, I just pay attention to those.
Yeah.
Both ways.
Yep.
Both very important signals.
And that's something that I feel like I have, just in the last couple of years, let myself officially like I feel like I subconsciously would lead with those feelings in the past and like, oh yeah, no, I'm trusting my gut, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of times I would also try and combat it. I would be like, no, that must not, no, there's a different answer. There's a different result. There's a blah, blah, blah. And I think I've officially in the last handful of years been like, no, if it feels like this, even if like the result that I'm like the possible result that I'm thinking of or feeling sounds really scary, my gut, the intuition, whatever you want to call it, it's telling me that that's the thing I'm supposed to move towards.
Oh yes, 100%.
And
every time I have not trusted my gut, it has served me poorly.
Yeah. And I think it's super important, honestly, to get those examples though. So then you can at least see like what happens when I don't listen to my inner self.
Yeah.
And,
no, I've learned that lesson plenty of times. I think it's finally sticking. Maybe.
Yeah. That's kind of where I am. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's sticking. And like, anything that I make decisions based off of that with have like been like, no, that was the right decision. Like,
I do think as I have gotten older though, I think I'm starting to understand, this is going to sound really strange, but it's like, I almost understand the feelings better now, that it's not just fear or anxiety or excitement, but being able to unpack those emotions to actually understand what's underneath them a little bit deeper. That's making it a little bit easier for me to say like, okay, this is why I'm feeling this way, and this is why it makes sense.
So, are you becoming, or have you always been like kind of a, for lack of a better term, like dissector of your emotions and feelings? Like, do you feel like, is that what you're getting more in tune with, or?
Yeah. So are you familiar with like EQ? The concept of like emotional intelligence. It's a 4-block score where you basically can score. I think it's 0 to 100. I believe is the scale on your ability to understand other people's emotions, your ability to manage other people's emotions, your ability to understand your own emotions, and your ability to manage your own emotions. I score extremely high on 3 of them, but the self-management of emotions we're working on.
Yeah.
In the sense of like, I can understand very deeply why I feel the way I feel. I can dissect, to your point, but sometimes it's very hard for me then to manage those deep emotions. And that's what I'm getting better at, is I can dissect them, and now what do I do with them?
Yeah. I feel like I've never taken that test, but I feel like my results would be really similar.
Yeah.
Because that is the area that I'm trying to get a lot better at. It's like I'm listening, to that inner voice more. I can fully I'm a dissector. I'm the person who's like, okay, I'm feeling this way, but like what made me feel that way? And what am I really feeling? Is this an in the moment feeling that just like I got an immediate sort of thing, or is it lasting? Okay, it's lasting. What does that mean? And what am I really thinking about? Or I dig probably too deep into like I think there's a balance of like sometimes you just got to let yourself feel things.
It's that particular like kind of scoring sort of pattern that I just described is very common in like an empath, because they understand everybody else's emotions so well, because they also understand their own so well. And then you're great at helping manage other people's emotions. But then because you exert so much energy understanding them, understanding yourself, and helping them, and typically prioritizing helping other people with their emotions over your own, you tend to fall a little bit short with managing your own then.
Yes.
So
a 1,000,000% yes.
Yep.
Like, and I know it's
very
like
common.
It's like I know it's like the cliche thing of like, oh well, I can't answer my own problems, but I can help anybody with theirs, and like that is probably a very common thing, and I fall into that cliche 100%. Like I could sit down with anybody, and I don't necessarily have all the right answers. It's not about that. It's more so like I can be a good listener.
In the process.
Yes, I will pay attention to that. And I love helping people just talk through things. Let me be the soundboard. Let me be the like, I can give advice and opinion if you want one or the other. Doesn't mean my answers are right, but I will be there for that. And I love giving that sort of energy. But then when it comes to something that I'm going through,
Nope.
I will fully, like, I'll understand everything that I'm feeling. And then I'm like, cool. All right, we broke it down. What do we do with it?
Yeah, no.
And then
like,
it's just spinning the tires.
Totally. Like I feel like when I'm communicating with other people, it's so easy when you're outside of the emotions yourself to be objective, to look at it rationally, to be like, okay, like what are we working towards? What's important? What's not? And you can really think of it in a very structured way. But like the moment it's me, I'm like, nope, we're just in the clouds. Everything's hazy. I have no idea what's happening. I don't know which way is north, and it's just so hard to like step back from those own emotions and look at them very rationally. I mean, as an entrepreneur, like that is it, right? Like every day I live in my business, and it's extremely emotional, and it's very hard to pull myself out of it and be like, let's look at this rationally. Here's what's happening. Here's what we're going to do. It's extremely true. And I think a lot of people who start businesses and entrepreneurs, especially first time ones, kind of go into it with this idea of like, okay, I've got an idea, and then I'm going to nurture it, and it's going to nurture, and it's going to be great. Everything's going to be perfect. And like, no, that is not what happens. Everything is usually on fire, and you take 2 steps forward and you take 1.999 steps back. And it's really hard when you're in it to rationally see what's happening and how to respond to it, because when you're in it, it's yours, and it's like, if this fails, I'm a failure. I am my business, and it's really hard to separate those two, just like it's really hard to sort of separate your own emotions and looking at them rationally.
Yeah, because when you have the attachment to something, you feel the possible consequences way more. Like you can feel the wins way more of oh my goodness, this could work, or this will work, or wouldn't it be amazing if, but immediately followed by that, it's, but wouldn't it be terrible if? And when somebody else tells you that, it's kind of easy to be like, well, no, look at it this way and this and that, and let's be rational and logical and practical. But there's always that like emotional blockade that is like so hard to get through. Even when, and like the hard part I think for me is like, I can pretty easily identify those emotional blockades. Like when I have them, you know what I mean? I'm like, all right, I'm thinking about this entire situation. I'm thinking about how I feel. I've broken all that down. I understand that. But man, I know that the thing that I'm trying to get to is on the other side of this. And I can literally be like, there is a thing blocking me
there
that I don't necessarily know the tools that I need to chisel through that.
This is why it's so important to have people that like understand what you're going through. Your life, they know you, they know your personality, they understand your goals, and they can help you see through that. It's so critical to have those people.
I love and this, kind of plays into what we're talking about, like the sum of 5 theory. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not.
It's basically just like you are the sum
Oh, yes.
of the 5 people like
you spend the most time with.
Yes, you
I
spend the
love
most time
that.
with
I completely agree with that too.
Yes. And it's hard
Absolutely.
sometimes because you're like, if you really do think about that, you're like, okay, what are my 5? And because that 5, that just doesn't mean positive, amazing. That 5 can be very bad.
Absolutely.
That 5 can be negative, So it's like if you sit back and you think like, what is my sum of 5, and I think maybe this is bending the rules of what that meant, but like, I also think that like that sum of 5 can also be the things you intake.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
If you spend 4 hours a day listening to Joe Rogan, he is in your sum of 5.
Exactly. Yes.
Totally agree.
Exactly.
If you listen to Fox News all day, that is sum of 5. If you listen to CNN all day, that is your sum of 5. Because you are completely agree with that. Because what you are taking in every day, whether through detailed human interactions or the social media you consume or the traditional news media you consume, is all starting to form your opinion of what is normal in this world. And that is what's going to create you, because you are, to your point, a sum and average, I guess, of the 5 things you take in. And when you have something that's completely different than those things, it just looks like an abnormality. When in fact, that might not be an abnormality. Your sum of 5 might be the abnormal, but you don't know because the world that you live in, the universe that you exist in, says that this is normal. Mm-hmm. I completely agree. And I've gone through this many times in my life where I've seen my sum of 5 change and how I've changed as a result, because what's a normal pattern, a normal routine, a normal set of interactions that might be unhealthy, later on when you have different people have different routines, different interactions, different attitudes, is a completely different life. And suddenly you're like, wow, like I'm the same person. I just air quoted because this is a podcast. You couldn't have seen that.
Hey, the YouTube watchers can see it. They caught the air quotes.
Great YouTube. You might be the same person, but who you're starting to reflect as a human is completely different, because you're starting to absorb these patterns and these ways of thinking. And that's why I think being around positive people, motivated people, healthy people, is so important to be taking in, because you want to be positive and healthy and, motivated. And being around people who are constantly negative or, partake in activities that maybe are not aligned to your goals, or are content with something that is contrary to what you want, it's just going to make it really hard for you to break out. And it's a lesson I learned a little later in life than I wish I had. And I think it's a lesson a lot of people learn late in life, which is that you don't have to stay friends with everybody that you were once friends with. It's okay for friendships to grow and change. It's okay for relationships to grow and change. You get to choose who comes into your life and who stays in your life. And it's very healthy to exit people, even if it's very painful. It can make huge changes in your life to let go of relationships that are no longer serving you. And that might sound selfish, but it's actually the greatest gift you can give yourself and to those people as well.
Yes, I think that thought process is hugely important, and something that in the last handful of years was some of the changes that I made for myself. And it's not identifying like, oh, I don't like this person anymore, or I don't, but it's like, okay, maybe this person and the energy that we share isn't something that I should be around a lot. Mm-hmm. Or if there's something wrong with this interaction that I have with this person or this entity, is there anything I can do to mold that or change that into a slightly different way? Mm-hmm. How could I approach this commonly negative environment or interaction? Is there anything more positive I could bring to it that maybe could reshape it? If I'm going into it and I know that like, man, doing this thing with this person a lot of the times leaves me feeling very drained, leaves me feeling very negative, like I wasted time.
Absolutely.
Well,
the concept of energy vampires. Have you heard that term?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's like when you're running into those.
It's that gut feeling again.
Right,
it's like, are you leaving the interaction feeling uplifted or feeling down? Are you feeling like yourself, or are you feeling not like these are very deep, just knowings that you have.
Yeah.
Of, is this relationship aligning me, supporting me in becoming sort of the truest version of who I am and who I want to be? And those are like very deep questions that you have to ask yourself. And sometimes it takes really difficult events to cause you to have to reflect on those things. But making those choices really consciously and knowing that it's a big world and you have an opportunity to change your sum of five if you want, to be courageous and to do it. Because it really does take courage to end relationships in all forms and find the ones that are right for you. But making friends as an adult is hard. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, I feel like I'm currently in the phase of feeling that. Like, I feel like I'm like, because I also like, so I don't drink. So, you know, like the idea of going to a bar and hanging out like isn't always at the top of my list. I will totally do it and I can have fun. But like for years, that was just something I pushed so far aside of like, no, friends, don't invite me to go do that. Like, I don't want, you know, and it's like, I feel like that's one of, I'm assuming, I feel like that's one of the easiest, like, public things that you can go do. And you're
Absolutely.
around people and you're getting introduced to people and blah, blah, blah. And I feel like for years, you know, I focused just so hard on, like my recent phases of self-growth have been like, I focus for so long on, I want to be, you know, I want to live in this entrepreneur world. I want to live in this self-employed world. Like, I want to build all these ideas and brands. Like, I have to work. I have to make this thing happen. I focused so hard on that I started to set a lot of those sort of like social things aside. And then over the last like 2 years, it became a lot of self-growth. So then it was like, okay, the work part, that's up and running. That's going, I know at least the trajectory. I've got the tracks set. You know, I know where I could be going with this. I'm still not working at ground zero with that anymore. Tons of work to be done, but I know it's moving. Then it became a lot of like inner searching and inner self-work of like, okay, I've neglected these parts of my self-worth for a couple years. So actually, I need to focus more on these things. I need to become a healthier version of myself. I need to become a better version of myself. And then now after going and starting to work on that chapter and getting that ball rolling, now I'm like seeing the next challenge is like, wait a second. Like, and I've been talking with a handful of friends about this recently, which sounds contradictory, what I'm about to say, but like, I feel like my social bar has been so low and I didn't notice it until just now.
Yeah.
And obviously a year's worth or almost a year's worth of staying inside and all that sort of stuff could add to that. But if I'm being completely honest, during that time frame, I enjoyed it. I really did. I was like, whoa, like I can just slow down. I can just chill, blah, blah, blah. Like
You got to reset.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it feels very strange to say that, but that really was how it felt.
And I think for a lot of people, like, it's okay that felt okay for you. You know, that's just living your truth. You needed a reset. You needed the quiet time. That's okay. I'm for sure the opposite. Like, I need my friends. I need to be out of the house. Obviously, pandemic was very difficult for a beverage startup that relies on grocery stores and restaurants.
Yeah.
So that was not great. But, you know, we're all living through this experience completely differently. We all are taking different things from it. Good, bad, learning, self-growth. I mean, it's cliche, but this is the journey, right? There's no destination here for any of us. It's just the journey. And there's not a finish line. I mean, there's kind of a finish line, but there's not like the finish line we're thinking of where it's like, oh, I made $1 million. Ta-da.
Now I'm done.
Now I'm done. No, you're not. This is it. And so as each of us goes through our different paths and figuring ourselves out and, you know, who we want to be in the future and who we were and how are we changing. And, you know, I am not the same person today that I was 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 15. And I guarantee 5 years from now, I'll be a different person than I am today. I have no idea who that is. I have some general ideas of who I'd like to continue to develop into, but realistically, who knows what external stimuli is going to come around and shape us. God forbid it's another global pandemic. I really, really hope not.
Yeah.
Maybe it's another presidential election that will send us off into a different course of action. You know, we just don't know what things that are so far out of our control are going to change us and how we're going to react and what we're going to take away from it. You got to take away, it sounds like a reset from the pandemic, an opportunity to really look inwards and say, what matters to me? What do I want my life to look like? What is my daily routine? What is my weekly routine? You know, what am I missing in my life that I want to put back in? And that's a great gift in some ways to be able to have that.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I was able to identify it, because it's like, I was so used to just like working all the time and grind and hustle and never stop and, you know, never slowing down, all the,
It's exhausting.
It's like when all of that was forced to slow down, I was like, wait a second, there's a lot of things missing. And now I want to put the work into those. And now, again, it's like, now that ball's rolling, I'm looking at that social side and I'm like, okay, I worked for years on the creative and the business. Then I've worked for a while. We're starting to work on the me. Now, like, you know, going back to like the sum of 5 thing, I'm like, what's the sum of 5 that I'm working with? You know, it's a couple cool podcasts and some, you know, of like people that I don't even know and a couple close friends. But then I'm like, okay, but what is that? You know, and do I need to reshape and remold that sum of 5? Because for a while, my sum of 5 was like, I want just business influence. I want creative influence. You know, like that was like the influence that I tried so hard to absorb. And then it became something different, just like we were talking about earlier. Like that sum of 5 can always change because you are always going to change.
Absolutely. It should evolve with you.
Exactly. And it's like a lot of that also, like, especially on the friendship side or relationship side, you know, there's like that, I don't know if you've ever seen that, like, I'm sure some people would think it's cheesy. I think it's wonderful. But there's like a artist photo of like one person with like a little flower popping out of their head talking to another person who's this bushel of beautiful flowers. And the one flower person is looking at the other person and saying, wow, you've changed. And the full of flower person says, I'm supposed to.
Yeah.
And like, that's so cheesy and cliche, but I'm like, that's honestly so true though. And those are conversations that do pop up sometimes of like, oh, you've changed. You're not the same person. And it's like, that should actually be something we're celebrating. That should be something we're stoked about. That should be something that we are proud of, and not of like, oh my goodness, I've changed. Like you said, I'm not the same person I was 5, 10, whatever years ago. I look back 3, 5, 10 years and I'm like, I literally am like, that person does not exist anymore. Like I couldn't be, you know, further from who that person was, and not even in a bad way of like, oh, I hate who I was or something like that. Different. You can just identify like, oh, a lot of growth has been made. We are very different people than who we once were. And it's also interesting to see maybe people not make those changes sometimes. And this is a question I wanted to ask you earlier, was like, do you feel like it is the comfort of a routine or a life that we find ourselves in that prevents people from working on that, you know, something like a sum of 5? Do you think it's like they find themselves comfortable in the environment that they're in to where they're like, oh, this is fine, even if it is negative, or even if it's like, what do you think it is that makes people not be able to uncover some of that negative influence sometimes?
Yeah, I'm actually just really thinking about myself in those situations and what kind of kept me from changing the sum of 5 faster. I think sometimes there is, and I think it varies, you know, by everybody, but sometimes there's that people pleaser mindset of, well, maybe the relationship is negative because of me and I'm doing something wrong and I just need to do X, Y, or Z to enable the relationship to be positive. I think sometimes there is a stigma in ending relationships. I've gone through not 1, but 2 divorces in my life, and I feel very much like I have a stigma for that. Much of that, I'm sure, is my own mental self-talk, but I also think there is some truth to that. And in both cases, relationships needed to end for various, very rational reasons, very constructive and personally well-aligned reasons, but nonetheless, you know, that's a word that has an association with it. And so sometimes, you know, you hold off on making those changes because you don't want that word associated with you, much less twice. Sometimes relationships change because are hard to move on from because we want people in our lives who have known us through our lives. And there's a lot of desire to have people who knew us win, that nostalgia aspect. And that's a hard thing to let go of, somebody who was there for certain chapters in your life that going forward, other people may not understand, and that the only person who will ever really have understood that chapter is somebody you're not in your life anymore. And I can see how that would also be really hard to move on from. I think there's a lot of reasons. Also, frankly, it's a really uncomfortable conversation if you ever have to have it versus just this sort of slow fade of a relationship. If you have to have the more direct conversation, it's really painful. And it's not one I think a lot of people want to face. So I think, yeah, comfort's definitely part of it, but I think sometimes there's a lot of other reasons why people take the time, maybe take extra time to move on from a relationship that maybe isn't serving them the way it should anymore, because relationships are hard.
Yeah. I'm so happy we just took this detour down into the depths of all
Very
the fields.
personal.
Yes.
Yeah.
So even kind of diving back into where we kind of left off, like in the timeline, like the whole reason we took this detour was because we were talking about, like what was that time frame like when you were down, when you weren't feeling, like you said, it wasn't just one day you were like, I'm upset about the circumstances at hand, and tomorrow I start a business, because that's often how these stories sound like.
Nope.
So, we just, went through all that of what it can be like going through those moments in time. Mm-hmm. What was getting out of that like for you? So this is even kind of going back to like, okay, back into the phase of like when you're officially getting the gears turning to like, I'm going to turn this T thing
into a thing.
Into an all capital letters thing. Like, let's change it from this thing to that thing.
Yes, lowercase thing to uppercase
Exactly.
thing.
Now there's emphasis on it. So walk me through, getting yourself out of that, that phase where it's just like, I'm feeling these things. I'm upset. I'm trying to figure out what I can do. You uncover, this is what I think I can do. So what are the steps to making it happen?
Oh, very, very slow. It involves a lot of Googling. It is not something, again, like you're like, oh, I'm going to do a business, and then bam, you're a business owner. It's not like that. There is not, maybe there is if you've done this 20 times and you know the process. But for me, once I had kind of had that Sarah Blakely, light bulb moment, I didn't even go right to beverages. I started thinking like, okay, well, what kind of problems do I see that I could maybe solve? And I started kind of listing them out. And I was looking at like medical devices, because that was my background. I was looking at health tech. I was thinking about, why is there not a services version of Amazon? I was thinking through like all of these different ideas. I didn't even have beverage on the list because I was thinking about my area of expertise and, how could I take the industry that I already work in and apply it to sort of my own opportunity. But none of them were like that exciting. And literally as I was like writing, this list out and kind of brainstorming, I was like drinking my product, ironically. And I remember like, because I was sitting at my dining room table, and I was like looking at it, I was like, I wonder if I make a beverage company. Well, what would I do with a beverage company? Like, what do I know about beverages, And of course, now here we are 5 years later. And so I finally just kind of added it maybe just in case. And I started to kind of go down each of these roads a little bit and think a little bit about, well, what would this look like and what would that look like? And honestly, every time I just kind of kept going back to beverage, I was like, I don't know. This is fun. I like it. I understand the unmet need. There isn't really anything out there like this. And of course, at the time, foolishly, I thought, like, how hard could it be to launch a beverage company? You don't need a 510K approval for this. You need a lot of other things. And so it was actually kind of going through that process and really thinking through a lot of other things that I did not pursue that I finally landed on, like, hey, maybe beverage. And again, even after I came to that conclusion, it wasn't like, okay, great, I'm gung-ho beverage. It was like, I'm going to make some samples of this in my kitchen and take it to the gym. And just be like, does this taste like crap? Do you like this maybe? Or like, what do you think? Like, would you buy this hypothetically? Have you seen anything like this before? What it really was like very, very early stage market research. So when people talk about like, oh, I did market research, it sounds like, very vague. Like, what does that mean? Market research meant I stood at my gym with samples in like a big plastic jar I bought at Target with like labels on them that I wrote on Sharpie markers. And I had a couple questions of like, does this taste good? Would you buy this? Would you pay $1.99 for this? What do you hate about it? And I literally bugged people at my gym, probably 30 people, to be like, can you do this? Can you fill this out for me? That is like what market research looked like, very tactically.
Yeah.
That was the process. And like the feedback was mostly positive, and I was like, okay, well, that's cool. Now what do I do? And then the next step again was like, okay, so maybe this concept is kind of resonating. And, I would like walk around grocery stores and I'd be like, I don't really see anything like this on grocery store shelves. Like I see Snapple and I see, Arizona and, all these other great tea brands. And I see LaCroix and I see all these great bubbly brands, but like why? I just don't see any bubbly teas, and I feel like there could be one. And so I was like, okay, well, so clearly the category doesn't have it. So that's cool. So maybe I'll look into this. And then the next step after that, again, no joke, was typing into Google how to make a beverage. Because I was like, I don't know how to do this. I have no idea. And it turns out there's an entire industry of beverage engineers. They're people that you hire who will take your concept and make it into a shelf-stable, professionally formulated product.
Wow, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either until I Googled it.
I just assumed that you make it in your kitchen and then you find the cans and then there it is.
No, there's engineers out there who specialize in this.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was the next step and I mean, keep in mind, this whole time I'm still working my J&J job. This is something I'm kind of doing, the nights, the weekends, the lunch hours, in between the meetings on my cell phone, just trying to kind of move it forward. And so, yeah, that was the next big step at the beginning of 2018. So 2017, end of 2017 was the big LLC step, the one that you joked about earlier. Yes, it took me almost a full year to finally be like, all right, maybe I should start an LLC. And I called the LLC Spritz Beverages. So the name actually has stuck. And then 2018, and I had to start the LLC because in order for me to hire the engineers, I had to put money in a checking account and open the LLC, and then I had to promptly empty the checking account to pay the engineering team.
Right.
And that kicked off all of our formulations in 2018.
So what was it like going through the formula stage? Like, I mean, because to me as an outsider, like that sounds so fun. I'm sure it's stressful, but
Parts
like
of it fun.
The idea of just like being like, take this and take that, and then someone does it, and then you're like, all right, we're going to try it. Like that. Yeah. That sounds super cool to me. But
I mean, it was, okay, so yeah, it was totally fun. So it started out where I made versions of my home product. I had like, those little mini Gatorade bottles.
Yeah.
I had like 5 of them. I like scrubbed them out. I took the labels off. And then I put my formula that I had like carbonated and made everything. I put it in the little Gatorade bottles and I screwed them like super tight so the carbonation would stay. And then I packed them on ice and then I overnight shipped them to the engineering firm so that they could get it and be like, here's what I make at home that I want to try to emulate with you guys. So they had like, yeah, it was really cool. So they got my little Gatorade bottles of my home version of Spritz tea. And we started there, and I had to put together like a creative brief, which is basically saying like, here are the things that I'm trying to make in this product and kind of my requirements. Like, I want it to be vegan. I want it to be low carb. I want it to have no sugar. I want it to be all natural. I want it to be able to be sold at Whole Foods, where they have very strict requirements with their suppliers. So these were the kind of things that I was saying, are the requirements of the product. And they shipped back the first samples. And I remember like one of them I really liked and the rest I hated. And I was like, uh-oh. Oh no. But, I was able to figure out why I didn't like them and what I did like about the first one. And we spent probably 9 months going through that process, getting the products, telling them what worked well, what didn't, them working on sort of a next batch. 2 of my really great girlfriends, Kristen and Kristen, would come over for Taco Tuesdays, and they would be my sampling panel. So they would try the products and give me feedback, and they'd rate them for me. So I'd bribe anybody with tacos to come sample just to get feedback that wasn't me. And then finally, we finished up and finalized all of our formulations in late 2018, and we moved into shelf life testing.
So a question that comes to mind is, because this is a conversation everywhere in the entrepreneur world, is like, did you feel like you had a healthy balance between the quote unquote day job with Johnson & Johnson while you're starting to put a lot more work into Spritz? Like, did you feel like those things ever started to kind of butt heads at any point in time, or you were like, hey, honestly, I had a decent schedule. I was good. I worked here. I focused. And then when I went home, it was mixing time. Like, it was fine.
I mean, yeah, honestly,
Okay.
it was pretty well balanced. It helped so much that I really loved doing it. So it wasn't like, okay, finish one job, time to go to another job.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
like, okay, finish one job, like time to go play.
Yeah.
And time to kind of dream and explore and envision what this could be and to be excited. And so in that way, it didn't always really feel like work. If it was like Saturday morning, I was drinking coffee on my laptop, I wasn't, banging out, a new press release. I was, envisioning like what was going to be the first product I launched. And so it had a very different energy to it. I mean, it did eventually butt heads, which is why at some point I had to, leave a full-time job to do this. But it was not until the end of 2019 that I had to make that choice.
Okay. Yeah. Well, because I know it's like, it's very easy for like dreams or passions to quickly become work. Because it's like, obviously you're putting work in to make them happen, but then it can easily turn it like the thing that I've talked with like a handful of people about.
I mean, it's definitely work now.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
definitely work now.
Yeah. When it's like, I feel like it's almost like it's easy to, especially like for the people who try to take the path of like, okay, I don't want the 9-to-5 job. I don't want the corporate job, whatever. I really want to just like live in my own world, work for myself, blah, 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 blah. I feel like it's so easy to you're just effectively going to create your own quote unquote 9-to-5 at some point anyway, you know what I mean? Because you're putting all the work in and then you're actually working more than 9-to-5. You're kind of working 24/7 in a way. And so
I dream about my business.
yeah.
Yes.
It's easy to, and I'm not even saying this in a negative light.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's easy to try to leave one machine, but effectively create your own machine. And it's like, oh, now I need to handle all this stuff now.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, people glorify entrepreneurship and they knock corporate America. And I think that there's absolutely pros and cons to both. There are absolutely things I miss about corporate America. I miss the stability. I miss knowing that I can actually turn my laptop off. I miss having really good benefits. I miss having a salary. I miss having a cell phone that was paid for. There's a lot of things to be said for corporate America, and that it can be really rewarding, and it gave me great experience and great community, and I would not change that experience for anything. And entrepreneurship is extremely different. I mean, to your point, yes, it's great that I'm building something, and I'm really excited about, back to the original part of it, the opportunity to live into kind of that purpose I laid out around wanting to sort of inspire other women to go after their sort of dreams and grab their power and influence in whatever form that takes, to be brave, to be bold, to be courageous. But it does not come, lightly. It comes with, to your point, you never stop thinking about it. And the stress levels are not even 10x, or like 100x, the corporate, because it's you. And that boss that always annoyed you, well, that's now you too. And she can be really mean sometimes. So sometimes it's freeing to a fault, because you don't have boundaries on either end. You can work 24 hours, or some days you might work 30 minutes. And neither one of those are good, healthy things. 9-to-5 is not a bad life.
Right.
You have time to work out in the morning, and then you have a great productive day, and then you have a wonderful evening with friends and family. It's a pretty good life.
Yeah, structure is not a bad thing.
Structure is not a bad thing.
And you can figure out what that structure looks like for you. 'Cause
Absolutely.
it's not the same for everybody.
Absolutely.
It is not the same for everybody. I have close friends who live a completely different life than I do, but we all get the same things done.
And absolutely. My dad is the one who's in the office at 4 a.m. and asleep at 7 p.m., and probably given my own preference, I'd be awake at 11 and work until 3 a.m.
See, that's a schedule that I want.
Yeah. I can't do that, unfortunately, with my job, but that is one of the freedoms it provides, to be able to kind of create the schedule that does optimize for you. But I think sometimes people go into it with this idea of like, oh, I don't have to have a schedule, and that can get you in trouble if you don't kind of proactively prepare yourself for, I need to get dressed today, I need to shower today, I need to eat today, I need to get things done today, and have some structure in place to make sure that you're doing these things consistently.
Yeah, and actual self-care.
Oh my gosh,
Like,
yes.
you know, just not just like, okay, I'm up, I'm working, I'm getting this done, I'm getting that done, because like it's so easy to
I
get
took a big
caught.
step last night. I'm very excited. I turned off the notifications on my phone and iPad for my work email addresses because I was like, you know what? I've got a computer for that. And I do not need to see that big red number stressing me out at 11 p.m.
Yeah.
I also turned off my Asana notifications at 4:30 p.m. So now at 4:30 p.m., Asana does not tell me all of the things I need to be doing. And I turned off all my Slack notifications at 4:30 p.m.
Nice.
So at 4:30 p.m. every day, all my notifications go down. I have my 30 minutes to like figure out what I need to do tomorrow, what I need to prioritize, what stuff do I need to get out of my head and onto paper so that I can have, to your point, like that time away from the churn, the grind, the constant thinking about things.
Mm-hmm.
And for so long, I mean, literally, this was last night that I did this.
Yeah.
For so long, I was like, well, I need to know if there's an emergency at 11 p.m. And like, no, actually, you don't. If there's an emergency, someone will call you.
Mm-hmm.
You do not need to read your emails at 11 o'clock because all they're going to do is stimulate your mind, and then you're going to dream in Excel, and that is not restful.
Yeah.
That
yeah.
is real. That
Right.
happens.
That's a boundary that I recently set, is not, because I think when you're in the creative industry or creative business, self-employment of any form, I think some people also think that you are on call 24/7 if they need you for something. Because something that I've noticed over the years is like, sometimes clients would just randomly out of nowhere call me. And for a while, I'd be like, well, if I'm not doing anything, I'll see what they need. And then at some point I was like, again, not even trying to be rude or anything, but it's like, you don't get access to me whenever you want. And I understand we all have phones in our pockets that allow everyone access to things all the time. But you don't have to give that access. They can call you or they can text you.
Absolutely.
You don't have to immediately answer that and say, oh my goodness, what do you need? Oh, you need a revision. Oh, you had a question, blah, blah, blah. It's like, honestly, I'll answer the call maybe if I can, but otherwise, hey, schedule the time that we need to chat.
Absolutely.
Then I'm down to chat.
I completely agree because on the two sides of that equation, right? You just have two different work schedules. You don't know if that client, that is their work day. Mm-hmm. Is Saturday their work day? Is that when they're trying to catch up and they need to talk to you? And if so, that's okay for them. And then you in the same time can say like, hey, like this is not my work day. I'll get back to you on Monday. That's completely okay. It's just about communicating those boundaries and saying, hey, like, I get it. You're working today. Totally fine. Like, I'm actually not available until Monday. And they'll be like, oh, okay, that's fine. I'm off Monday, but I'll be available Tuesday. Let's make that work. That's a completely healthy communication of one person saying, hey, it's Saturday. I need help. Are you available? And somebody else saying like either A, hey, yeah, I am available. Let's talk. Or no, I'm not available actually, but I am available this day. Mm-hmm. That is a very healthy conversation. Yep. Because everybody does not work the same schedule.
No, and that communication factor is huge. Like, I appreciate a text from someone saying, when could we have a call? I want to chat about something.
Absolutely.
Rather than just the random call out of nowhere. And it's like, to your point, hey, okay, they're ready to talk about this thing right now. I understand, but I'm in the middle of this, or I'm not prepared. So it's like, all we got to do is communicate. Let's schedule this call. Even if we're scheduling the call an hour from now. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Okay, cool. I can finish up what I'm doing right now, and I will be mentally and physically prepared to chat with you about what we need to talk about.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be this like 24/7 on the line, on the call. Like, because it's easy to make yourself available 24/7.
Oh, and feel like that's the expectation you have to live up to. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's something, again, that I'm going through a big learning in life right now. Of being able to like communicate needs and prioritize myself and have boundaries and be okay with those things, and that it might ruffle some feathers sometimes, but that's okay. That's life. Mm-hmm. Going back to sort of the circle of five in my world. What did you call it in your sum of five?
Yeah.
Same idea. Like, it's okay to be like, hey, changing this is going to ruffle some feathers, but this is actually me prioritizing myself. And that's okay. This is all kind of linked together. Yep.
And just like you said, like you're always changing those things. You're always learning those things. And that is what I think we should be doing. Like I feel like people who listen to, if they're avid listeners of this show, they're probably like, man, every episode this dude says he's learning something new or he's figuring something out. And it's like, that's 100% truth. Like, I'm not making that up just for the conversation. Like, I literally feel like I am always evolving or changing or learning something because I'm making sure that I'm open to those things. So my perspective on something today might change tomorrow if I you know what I mean, take in something new where I'm like, oh, never saw it that way, or I didn't know that, or I didn't, like, cool, I learned a new skill.
You now know that there are beverage engineers out there.
Exactly.
See, you learned something new.
So next time I get excited, I'm like, I want to start a beverage company.
You know to Google that.
I know that I can just Google it.
See, I know that the circle of 5 is also called the sum of 5.
Look at this.
See? Learning.
Before this conversation, we didn't know those things.
I know.
And now by the end of this, we're going to know so much.
It's amazing.
But it is like, it's that constant growth.
It really is.
And it really is like, it's a wonderful thing to do and a wonderful thing to open yourself up to. And in strange ways, and everybody's got their own things, everybody's got their own lives that they're dealing with. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of people actually shut themselves off sometimes to that growth, that change, that evolution of, going back to the flower picture of like looking at somebody else and be like, oh, you've changed so much. And it's like, but why haven't you? Yeah. Like it's an exciting thing to do. Yeah. So back into the, the taste tests, and you're getting these formulas and everything like that. How long was that process of, because you said it was what, 9 months right?
It was almost all of 2018.
And then, so what is the end of that look like? Did you settle, like, was the goal like, hey, I want a spread of 4, I want one big one, I want, like, what was that like?
Yeah, so I had settled on 5.
Okay.
We currently have 4 on shelf, and the 5th one is a seasonal flavor that we've not released. We're trying to see if we can get the first 4 to work well before we think about line extensions. I think that it's always so easy in hindsight to be like, oh yeah, like here are the 10 steps I followed, and just do those 10 steps. And it's not like that, because you're like at step 1 and then you finish step 1 and you're like, okay, what now? Mm-hmm. You don't have this path. You're just kind of keep figuring it out each time. And so what I did then was I was like, okay, well, so I made the product. It's in shelf life testing right now. Now what do I do? I've got a bank account that's empty, but it's there. I've got an LC. I've got some formulations that are making sure they, don't grow mold. What do I do next? And I was like, okay, well, I guess I need to sell this somehow and market it somehow, and I probably need some money for this. And do I have a manufacturing place for this? And the answer to all of this was no. I have none of these things. Well, I probably need to figure those out. And so probably immediate next step was to figure out how the heck to put together like a business plan for a small business. My experience building business plans was for corporate America, where you have a $50 million budget and thousands of employees to do those things.
Right.
So it was a very different scope and scale. And I was really thankful I joined the Women's Small Business Accelerator here in Columbus, Ohio. That class started in January or February of 2019. And I went through that program for about 6 months. And they were great, helping me look at it from the small business perspective, because I just didn't have that one. I was just like, I don't even know. Like, we have an entire department of HR. We have an entire team that does, competitive research. Like, I don't know how they do that. Yeah. I know that I get the output of it, but how do they actually find it? And, that it's just, it's the same concept, but just completely different scales. And so, went through that process. It was excellent. Really, really would recommend that to anybody listening, the Ohio WSBA program. And came out of that, again, with basically the next big questions. It's basically, entrepreneurship is just continuously getting to the next question of, what am I doing next? I'd love to say there's a playbook. It's just a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So I finished that. I was like, okay, great. So I have this plan. I have to, go out and test the market. I have to go out and take this product that I've developed and see whether or not people will actually buy it. That's the next step. Great. Okay, how do I do that? Okay, well, back to the whole, we got to make this somehow. So worked with my engineering team to be like, so you guys develop beverages. Do you know anybody that actually makes them? And they were great. They helped get some introductions. Another big lesson, the amount of times you just can ask for help and get answers is very high. We should all be asking far more questions and asking for far more help.
I'm so bad at that.
I'm so bad at it. And it's like every time I ask for help, someone's like, oh, yes, of course I can solve that. I'm like, why did I not ask this before?
I'm like, man, the 33 scenarios I played out in my head of what it looked like when I asked you, you said no in all of them.
Yeah.
So you actually just said yes.
You just said yes on the first one. Okay, got it. Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Remember that for next time.
Yep.
And then I forget it.
Yep, every time.
Yep.
Yep. No, in summary, ask for help, accept help, admit the things you don't know, because trust me, you don't know a lot of things. And that's okay. Nobody does. We're all making it up as we go. But acknowledge that and ask people who do know how to do these things and have done these things before how to do them.
Yes.
They will help you because they don't want you to make all the same dumb mistakes that they made.
Right, right.
I'll tell you all the things not to do when starting a beverage company. I have a whole list. But yeah, so I went through that and through the WSBA, worked with my engineering firm to find what's called a co-packer. I didn't even know what that term was. Basically, it's a manufacturing plant for hire. So I do not have a manufacturing plant. I don't have a commercial kitchen. I literally pay a facility a co-packing fee to rent their entire team and facility for a day. So I buy all the raw materials. They go to the co-packer, to the manufacturing plant. And then for one day, I have teams on the line. I have scientists. I have quality control. I have the batching team. I've got people with forklifts. For one day, they're mine. And I just have to be there. They all know what to do. They've got management that I hired for the day to run all of it. And they produce the product. So that's a co-packer. So that was the next one. Okay, great. I have this concept. It's been developed. I have a business plan. Now, in order to figure out whether anybody wants this, I need to make the product and try and sell it. So I figured out how to make it, manufacture, fantastic. Then I was like, okay, great. So they told me it's going to cost $50,000 to make this because that's the absolute minimum amount of units that they will run for me. And I was like, okay, cool. That's a lot of money. Okay.
Checks bank account. Okay.
Still says 0.
Yeah. How many of these zeros do you need?
That's a lot of.
Okay.
Can we move the zeros the other direction? Maybe it's
Yeah,
just like a 5 in front of them.
Yeah, we can put the 5 on the opposite side.
Yes,
if that's what you-
exactly. Exactly. Just instead of 5 cents, let's flip it the other way. So, then the next question became like, okay, great. So I have to make a product. I've got a way to make the product now. I just don't have the money. So thus begins fundraising. That is the entryway into fundraising, which I had never done before. Whole new wild experience. I hate asking people for money, no matter how much I believe in the product and the concept and the market. But did that. Had some personal capital of my own in, savings from Johnson & Johnson, and had some friends and family. What I've now learned is called literally the friends and family round of fundraising, which is when, you have this crazy idea and people are like, yeah, you seem crazy enough to pull this off. And they bet on you, which is slightly terrifying in hindsight, because when friends and families invest in you, you are in that for the long haul, because I will lose my own money any day, but I am not going to lose theirs. I will bleed to death before I lose their money. So anybody taking friends or family money, think carefully about how you feel when your great aunt is wondering where her investment went. But yeah, so we did that. We raised and I say we, like there's multiple people, but it's just pretty much me and my dog. But it sounds bigger when I say we.
It sounds way cooler.
Yeah, me and my dog, we raised.
Yeah.
So we raised a small friends and family round to help support the launch. And so that was great. I was like, okay, here we go. We're going to go out. We're going to test this concept. We're going to land some retailers, and we're going to sell the product and see what pricing works and see what promotion strategies work. It's going to be great. We went to I applied to this pitch contest, New Beverage Showdown, in December of 2019. And I went to California and pitched on stage, and out of 12 companies, I got second place. I was so excited.
Wow.
I was like, here we go, like we're about to start. And then, I flew home, and I think it was December 15th. I'm not exactly sure what day it was. But we did our very first production run. So I went to the plant in New Jersey, and we made 50,000 units. Which is a lot, by the way. 50,000 units is a lot of product, but that's the absolute bare minimum. And I asked multiple co-packers. I was getting quotes of 200,000 units, 500,000 units, and I was like, what am I going to do with 500,000 units? Like, I'm just trying to do a test here, guys.
Yeah. I don't think there's that many people at the gym that I'm going to.
Yeah, I know. Guys, how am I going to sell this? I don't have that many gym members. Yeah, so you did it. You came back in January of 2020. We went live. That was our launch month, and we were, and this actually then did shortly after become a we. But the idea was, okay, great. We've got this product. We have some capital here. We're going to use this capital to obtain retail accounts. We're gonna go sell to grocery stores. We're gonna sell to restaurants. We're gonna try direct to consumer. We're gonna try all these ways to get the product to people. These channels of distribution or places to sell it. And then once we get it in this place, we're going to get it in grocery stores. We're going to try different prices, and we're going to try different ways of promoting it. We're going to do demos, and we're going to do events, and we're going to do all this stuff. And we're going to see if we can get this little science experiment to work, right? Can we get people to buy this product regularly with the right price, the right promotion, the right place of purchase? And that was what we were going to go out and test in 2020. And then in February of 2020, we had a couple really, really big things happen. Whole Foods had accepted us for a pilot in their Mid-Atlantic region. And we were like, oh my gosh, we are ahead of schedule. This is fantastic. We've already landed our big, grocery pilot account. And then I think it was the end of February, we did the Mid-America Restaurant Expo, which is where, it was a trade show where we went to obtain restaurant pilots, so fast casual, grab and go cold cases. And we had about 50 restaurants that wanted to bring us on for a test. It was great. I was like, oh my gosh, here we go. We've got our grocery stores, we've got our restaurants, like time to go start testing. I hired on then 2 people to help with that on March 1st of 2020.
This is going great.
Everything's going great. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. We are so far ahead of schedule. This is fantastic. We are going to have so much time and so much money to go test all these channels.
And you were walking around and you were like, you know what? It's going to take a pandemic of the entire world to slow us down.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, right. That's not happening anytime soon.
Like a week later, 2 weeks later, and I just remember sitting there being like, what is happening? Mm-hmm. And as we all know, grocery stores ransacked, shut down, haven't done category reviews, didn't do innovation. Our Whole Foods pilot was canceled, just done. Trade shows, ways that you get retailers, all canceled. Virtual trade shows, awful in food and beverage. What are you doing over virtual? You can't taste the product. You can't smell the product. It's useless.
Yeah.
Yep. Nope. Waste of money. There was no way to get on shelf. The world just stopped. So the process of category reviews, that's where, a buyer at a grocery store determines what he or she wants to bring into their set. So when you go to the grocery store and you go buy oatmeal, and there's like 15 different kinds of oatmeal, that's a set. And somebody is responsible for determining which oatmeal is on that shelf and what price it's at and where is it on the shelf and how many facings do they get. So how many times do you see Quaker Oats? The process of evaluating that set and determining what stays, what goes, and what comes in new was stopped. So any young brand that was about to get on shelf was not on shelf. So we could not be sold because no retailer would take us. Restaurants, as we all know, those stopped. All of our pilot partners bowed out of that one too because they couldn't. I mean, you can't blame them. They don't have customers. They're trying to figure out how to keep their own businesses afloat.
They're not even unsure of their own future. So
many of them, some of them have shut down. Mm-hmm. And so we just went from the greatest momentum to no momentum, in a swing of a day. And I remember, again, like everybody, just being like, okay, maybe this is just 2 weeks. Maybe it's just 6 weeks to flatten the curve. And here we are, 2 years later. And I feel like we're just now starting to come out of it. Mm-hmm. And that is the kind of wild ride of entrepreneurship where what was supposed to be a year of piloting with a team of 3 people, myself and 2 others, has turned into over 2 years of very painful treading of water, termination of employees because we couldn't afford them, as well as just very transparently living off of my own personal savings because I still have to extend the runway of my company as long as possible in order to still achieve that milestone we had set out to achieve in early 2020, which was get pilots and prove whether or not this concept is scalable. It's just taken us 2 years and far more money than we ever wanted to get to where we are. But today, we are now on shelf in 189 Kroger stores. Thank God.
Yes.
And I, of course, have to give a shout out to all the little independent retailers, all the little independent stores that have kept us afloat. So for the past 2 years now, we've been sold in Hills and Wylands and Reble and Little Kitchen and bakeries and all these great independent grocery stores and restaurants that have been what have kept us afloat. So I have to give the shout out to like all of those amazing local partners. North High Brewing has us on their menu. Just really, really great, Harbor Yoga, like all these great little places are the ones who have kept us going despite the sort of enormous odds against us. And it's those places that have allowed us to still have sales and get brand awareness and have people try the product, so that now that we are finally in our massive pilot, that we are finally going to be able to say what pricing works, what promotions work. We have people who are already here and are familiar and know the story and are like, we are here for you. Where is the local Kroger? We're going to buy everything, because they know how far we've had to go to get to this point, and the sacrifice of the team to do that. I mean, these are people who, they were employees. They had salaries. They had families. And they took turns being furloughed so that we could, again, try and just extend the runway. Because we, like everybody, didn't know what was going on. We didn't know how long this was going to last. I don't know that many of us thought we'd still be here 2 years from now.
Yeah.
With the world truly forever changed.
Right.
Consumers do not shop the way that we used to.
Mm-hmm.
The process of grocery shopping is permanently changed.
So I have a question with technically 2 parts.
Okay. Part A.
So was that was there any moment in that time frame where you were like, this could be it? Is this like, I would assume, probably the most difficult challenge? Absolutely. Or the second part to that, if that particular decision wasn't, what was?
Yeah. Oh no, you're completely right. I mean, when we had set out to do this, at J&J, there was always what we called, the kind of the go, no go decision point. It's the decision tree, right? What are we working towards to determine whether or not to continue forward with this project? And for me, that decision was supposed to be the output of pilots to say whether or not we have product market fit. Can we sell this product at a price point with promotion tactics that allow us to have a path to profitability? Maybe not even right now, but at least in the future as we scale up manufacturing. Those were the questions we were trying to answer. And we have been unable to answer them for 2 years. So for 2 years, we've been sitting in the dark, wondering, does any of this matter? Does any of this sacrifice matter? I mean, are we running after something that's going to fail, or are we this close to success? And you don't know. And that is like the biggest, greatest source of anxiety, because there's an opportunity cost to this. For me personally, I used to have a job that paid me well. I used to, not have to live on personal savings. I used to have health insurance with my job. Shout out to my friends that give me health insurance. And there's that opportunity cost to not knowing every day, because for me, I do not have the ability to pay myself out of my company, because I need to extend my runway as long as possible so that I can answer that question. But the longer we go without that question, the less runway we have to answer it. At which point you're like, well, now I've just spent 2.5 or 3 years doing this for nothing. I don't even have an answer to my question. And it's that not knowing that has been incredibly difficult, because you just, every day you're like, am I an idiot for chasing this, or am I an idiot for giving up on it? And you don't know. And that unknowing is extremely uncomfortable for me.
Yeah. A major flaw in how I think and how I just do anything is I love to be aware of the result so I can base my moves off of that.
Absolutely.
And you don't get that.
No.
You just don't.
I have no baseline data to act on. I'm about to have some, thank God. But
yes, that is a huge, at least there's been a turnaround there.
But you're operating in the dark. You don't know whether to go left or right. And you're guessing.
The way that, I love the way that you put, am I an idiot for continuing to think this is going to work, or continuing to think that I'm almost to the result that I want, or am I an idiot if I give up? Like that is the constant battle. And I know, like, we can't see into the future. We don't know the actual result, but like I am so guilty of that so often, from business to personal life to anything, where I'm like, because usually I'm like, if I have a glimpse of what the potential result is, that like makes me feel better. And I'm like, okay, cool. I've got some sureness.
I can see that.
Yes.
I can work
see
towards
like
that.
the tiny glimmer of like the light at the end of the tunnel sort of
Absolutely.
thing.
Something to focus on and work towards.
If there's that, even the tiniest bit, I'm like, okay,
Yep.
let's go. Let's
Totally.
find out what happens.
Pitch black.
When there's nothing,
Lost.
I'm like, how stupid am I for walking down this tunnel? Or
Yes.
is this what I should be doing? Or no,
And
no,
are
no.
there
like,
zombies around me?
right. Like, and
I feel like I'm about to get eaten by a zombie. That's
Exactly.
exactly how I feel in entrepreneurship.
yes. Like, is that a light at the end of the tunnel, or is that two glowing eyes?
Yes.
Like, I really can't
We're not
tell.
sure.
What am I walking into? Is it the exit or the thing into the new world that you're going to live in? Or is it some huge monster that's going to devour you?
Yep.
And then you're like, wasted a lot of time walking down that tunnel.
Yep.
And what a mistake that was. Like, I am...
And you
and-
just don't know what you're walking towards.
no.
Is it zombie eyes, or is it, the Garden of Eden?
Right. And it's...
And the answer is probably neither. It's probably the
Yes.
Eden with zombies.
Right, yeah, it's going to be, it's like, hey, you get some of this, but you also get some of this. So,
Yeah.
like, deal with it now. Like, now you get to walk through this. Isn't
Yeah.
that cool? Like, but I'm super guilty of that. But, like,
And this has been, I think, one of the biggest changes for me personally is I'm still absolutely working on this. I am nowhere near complete in solving this. But is this idea of like, I have to focus less on, is it a zombie or a light, and more on, I'm just walking forwards. This is the journey. We're figuring it out as we go, one step at a time, because it's extremely hard. I mean, not to like completely switch analogies here mid talk, but like if you're standing at the base of Everest, to look up at Everest and be like, that's really far away. I'm never, ever, ever going to get there. Instead, just like look down at your feet and be like, one step. And it's extremely hard to not have that really scary perspective of like, do you know how far I have to go for this to happen? I got to do this for like 10 more years, and I got to convince a lot of people to give me a lot of money. And I'm going to make a ton of mistakes, and I'm going to upset a lot of people along the way. And if I do all of that and some other things go well, this might go well. Because it's not like some perfect path at all. It's not. It's people, anybody that tells you that like entrepreneurship is like, oh yeah, like I get it. I just raise money and then I go and do it and then I raise more. Like, no, this is not what it's like at all. It's everybody is just fraught with insecurity and uncertainty and trying to figure it out and troubleshoot as they go. And I think that's actually the differentiator, is as long as you can just keep pushing forward, acknowledging what the situation is and being like, here's what it is. This is what we have to work with. It's not much. Some bad stuff happened. That's in the past. Here's what we have right now. What do we do with what we have? And how do we try to get one step closer to that goal? And maybe that goal has to come in closer. Maybe my goal was, I'm going to make these numbers up. Maybe my goal was $500,000 in sales. Maybe this year my goal is 200,000. Can I hit 200K and tell myself, see, we made progress. I believe in this. And now I can have other people believe in it because I will have to fundraise in order to continue this vision. Those are the things that like I'm personally working on, of trying to just say, it doesn't have to be a $1 billion IPO. I just have to keep working towards something. And maybe that something is just the knowing of, do we continue to pursue this or do we not? And having some clarity around that answer.
So I know you explained a little bit of this already, but like, I mean, so what did you do to, I'll just use the word pivot during a pandemic? Like, what was that phase like of not just sitting and being like, I don't know what we're doing and we're just not doing it anymore? It was more so, I don't know what we're doing, but we're going to keep doing it.
We got to keep doing
like,
something.
How did you keep things moving?
Yeah, I mean, when we had, our original plan had been to, we produced and then we were going to, obtain, I almost kind of broke it down into sort of like some milestones would maybe be a good way to think of it. Like, number one, can we make a company? Ta-da, we did. Number two, can we get some retailers to test this with? Milestone 3, with these retailers, can we do different pricing and promotion tactics to show success? If we do, fantastic. Milestone 4, can we communicate that success to potential investors that enables us to raise the funds to take this concept we've developed and start to commercialize it more broadly? That was kind of the initial, like, I guess, what, 4-step, I think that was 4-step plan for what we were going to try to accomplish throughout 2020. So of course we got number 1 done. Awesome. And then number 2, which we thought was going to take 3 to 4 months and maybe $75,000 to $100,000 total, because we have trade shows and we have broker teams and slotting fees and whatever else. And then the rest of the money, again, about $200,000 or so, was going to be used to execute all of the in-field marketing. Instead, what happened was we could not get to milestone number 2. Whole Foods pulled out. No grocery stores were taking any new products. And we were like, how, like, this is what we have to hit. I mean, I wouldn't even argue, I would say it wasn't even a pivot. It was more of just a change in, like, how on earth are we going to get to these retailers? Because the original plan was trade shows, like everybody does. Expo West, Expo East, Fancy Foods, retailer category reviews, range meet submissions, all of these kind of traditional ways of getting in front of retailers and obtaining pilots within your region. And so when all of those tactics just stopped, we were like, what else can we do to get retailers? Can we try to just call on them in the store? The answer to that was no. Can we hire a public relations team that specializes in industry and trade publications and get more interest sort of organically? That didn't work either. Can we hire, or actually that's the one that did work, so I'll hold on to that one. Can we proactively open distribution centers with our distributor even though we don't have anchor retailers for them? Can we just open them and then say, look, we're already in your distribution center. You can just pull us. You don't even need to anchor it. That didn't work either. These are all very, by the way, expensive tests to try to figure out if any of these things can work to get us towards this next goal. And then finally, the last thing we tried is we were like, I mean, maybe we could try and hire a national broker team, which is pretty expensive because you're paying them. And maybe they can get us some pilots. And we saw limited results from that until the end of last year, I guess last summer, because like we worked with them for almost a full year before we finally saw an outcome from that. And that was what landed us our Kroger pilot. But instead of having like this, one budget amount and these couple of tactics to obtain that next milestone, our pivot was that entire playbook disappeared and we just had to figure out anything to get us to that next milestone.
Literal shots in the dark.
Literally, we were like, what else can we do? We can try and call in stores. We can try these, trade moves. We can try doing something with our distributor, and again, none of those things worked. Like, I'm not going to try and sugarcoat this. Like, they all failed. None of them landed a pilot account for us. And they were all expensive things to try. And finally, thank God the last one did work, because that at least has now gotten us to this milestone of now, great, we're in an account that is large and meaningful and can get us data on how we're performing, both ourselves as well as relative to other products in our set. But that now means that my next milestone, which was supposed to have a lot of time and a lot of money, now has like 4 months and a much, much smaller amount of money. And the reason it has 4 months is because of the money, right? We have a limited amount of runway. We're a startup. And the capital that we had raised, which had intended to be split very differently between obtaining retailers and then testing on shelf, has gone completely the other direction, where we had to utilize the majority of it just to get him on shelf. And so now we're at the point where, again, we just have to say, like, this is the circumstances we have. This is the money we have. What's the absolute minimum sign of success that we can show to be able to say, look, there is light, and they're not zombie eyes. There is real light here. We are seeing proof that we can do this successfully, and you just need to give us more time to continue to expand this. And if I can show that success in those stories, we can literally buy ourselves more time. We can sell more of the company to get ourselves more time to try to continue to expand that footprint. But that's been the biggest, maybe it's a pivot, maybe it's just a change in strategy, or maybe if anything, it's the exact same strategy and just trying to find any way to keep pushing towards it. Mm-hmm. Because we can't do any of the other things until we do these first things.
Right. Let me ask you this. out of obviously that huge curveball that was thrown your way that completely changes even the
entire world.
Everything. Yeah. Do you feel like you got to feel that win of when it did finally work? Or do you feel like you were like either then or maybe some time has passed and then you let yourself feel the win? Or did you feel it in the moment of like do you feel like you were so caught up in like, holy crap, we're just trying to make this work. I am stressed. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm feeling all the things. Did you get to feel that win? Like
oh
when
my
you
gosh,
landed
I started to cry. Yeah. When I got the phone call that Kroger had accepted us into pilot, that was after, that was September, maybe August, sometime in mid 2021. We had been at that point treading water for a year and a half of just trying to move forward. And at that point, I'd also had to make difficult decisions around employees, which is incredibly painful. I've had to, again, see some personal, challenges through that time. And it just felt like, punch after punch after punch after punch. And then in that one moment, I got that phone call, and any pilot in general is really exciting, but to get a pilot with the most competitive grocery store and one of the most competitive sets is the single best sign of traction we've had yet. Because a Kroger buyer in general is going to get thousands of samples for their set per year. And Beverage in particular is an extremely, extremely competitive set. And so knowing that we were chosen out of thousands to pilot was the single best moment in this journey yet, because it was the twofold. Number one, it was just amazing validation in general. If that had happened 3 months into this process, it would have been amazing, because that's a huge proof point that somebody who has such power and influence and knows this industry of beverage inside and out chose us. That says that our brand is online, it's on trend, and Kroger's willing to give us a test. That's amazing. But to have that happen after everything else, to have that one come through a year and a half into this, after all the change and all the pain and all the heartache and all the days where you were just like, I just don't want to do this anymore. I'm exhausted. I am stressed out. I can't sleep. And I'm just mentally unwell beyond belief. To then have that happen was one of the maybe top 10 best moments of my life. Because I was like, you know what? Even if nothing else happens, even if we fail miserably on shelf and we have to donate everything, to Mid-Ohio Food Bank, which would be great. I love supporting them. We had to donate a lot of product to them in 2020 when we weren't able to sell it. Even if nothing else happens, the Kroger buyer chose us, and chose us after we sacrificed for a year and a half to have that opportunity. And I feel incredibly proud of that. And not to say that it's perfect, because if Spritz doesn't work, there was cost to that. There were people who invested in it. There's opportunity cost of me doing it. There's the public feeling of failure. There's a lot of weight associated with that. There's the whole reason I started it, right? Which was to try to change culture. And did I fail? Or maybe I didn't. Maybe I was still successful because I showed that people can try and can do things, and you can take big swings, and sometimes you're going to miss, but that's okay. You got to get up to that plate. And I think that's what that moment actually meant to me, was despite it all. And there was a lot of personal stuff that I went through during that time as well, which only amplifies it. That I had, in, I guess, many ways accomplished something very meaningful, and that I could feel proud that through all of it, through all the sacrifice and the heartache and everything, that I still did something that I think is rare, and that I can take forward with me in life. And I think that other people can also pull courage from as well.
Kathryn, I don't know how we can top that. I don't know. It's just awesome to hear the result that did come. And obviously, you get through one portion of the tunnel and you find out that the eyes were just the end of the tunnel, but then you find out, oh, there's another tunnel that I immediately have to enter. And there's always going to be everything like we've talked about up to this point. There's always going to be the next layer of challenges, the next level of hardships, whatever it may be. And we're always going to learn how to better equip ourselves to figure those next things out. I loved getting to hear all of that. Like I honestly learned so much also. Like that, I just feel like that is an entire...
You can check that off your day.
Yes. Like learned a bunch of things. Like, I mean, I'm such an outsider to that world, but being able to see and, have been for, a handful of years, like familiar with Spritz and always just wondering like, what is this? How did it become a thing? Like, how am I seeing it pop up in these both local places and Kroger and everything else? And I'm like, I love that we just got to uncover that. And I know before we wrap up, this is a silly question to ask at the end of kind of the story, but like, where in general did this, like, I'm just going to say like both mindset and resiliency that I feel like you have, where did that come from even? Was that like growing up? Was it like super supportive, like household of like, do all the things and yes. And I mean, you also started the story by being like, yeah, when I was about to go and do a triathlon, I just poured some things together and then I had a drink. Like there's so much there even like before Spritz became a thing. Like where does all that come from?
I have no idea, honestly. And it's funny because I admit I actually don't feel resilient. I feel tired. I feel worn down. I feel like I should be stronger, and I guess maybe, I don't know. That's very kind of you to use that word. And I think probably objectively you're correct. But it's hard because I think for me, it's still, I just see where I am right now. And I'm just like, I'm so tired. And I think this is part of the problem with the world is like you see everybody else doing the things and you're like, they're so strong and like they're so together. And nobody actually shares that like I probably seem like I have it together. Like I seem resilient. And like on the inside, I feel like everybody else has it together and I'm the one that's like duct taped my life together. I mean, I of course, I can always credit my parents. I was very lucky to have wonderful, supportive parents that were very encouraging to us, growing up. But I think honestly, resiliency just comes from doing it and just every day pushing forward. Training for an Ironman is exhausting. Like you start out training for that thing and you're like, wow, 1 mile is really tiring and I need to do 140.6 of these in a row. What? And then just one day at a time, you just get a little bit stronger and a little bit stronger. And then one day you do it and you cross that finish line and you're just like, that was probably one of the other top 10 moments of my life was crossing that finish line and being like, it wasn't about that day. It wasn't about that day where it was like a 14.5-hour race. And it wasn't even about the 9 months of training beforehand. It was about the 4 years of doing the sport before that and the 12 years of running before that. Like all of those things. And then my parents introduced me to sports at age 5, right? It's all of those little things that added up to that moment. And I think that in some ways, it's the same thing in my life where all the things that I've done, sports I've played or schools I've gone to or tests I've taken or, jobs I've worked or whatever have made me little by little by little stronger and stronger and stronger so that when I've gone through this, emotional Ironman of the past 2 years, it's whittled me down, yes, but it's I think the only reason I've survived is just having to look at it as one step at a time and just try not to look at where that finish line is. Because if you start an Ironman and you are told where that 140.6 miles is and you have to make it there with your body, you're just going to be like, no, I'm going to go get some pancakes.
Yeah.
See you tomorrow.
Right. I'll meet you at the finish line.
Yeah.
But just not...
in a car.
Yes.
Maybe a helicopter. Do you know how long it takes to drive 140.6 miles? Yeah.
No.
Like 3 hours.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and you got to swim, bike, and run that.
And you did that?
I did that.
That is insane.
Yeah, and there were jellyfish in the beginning. I know.
Jellyfish?
Yeah, I got stung by a jellyfish.
While that was happening?
10 minutes into the race.
Dude.
In my face. It was awful. That was not a good start. I like to think that maybe this pandemic was the jellyfish.
That's actually very fair.
Maybe this is the jellyfish.
That was the big sting at the start.
This was the big sting at the start.
Right when it was about to
see,
just get going.
Still got that whole race ahead of me.
I love that.
I think that's a good metaphor.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. Like, I like that was just uncovered right now. That is.
This is just a really big jellyfish sting on my face.
Yeah. And guess what? It'll go away at some point.
It does. It burns for quite a while.
But
then it goes away.
But do you not, what was it? You toss pee on a jellyfish sting? Is that real?
I think that's the thing you're supposed to do. I just kind of cried while swimming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was no
I just had to kind of keep swimming. You know, like Dory from Finding Nemo, just keep swimming. Oh, the number of times I say that to myself while swimming, and probably should say that in entrepreneurship, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. It's a really good mantra.
Oh, it 100% is. I love that. Well, as we start to wrap up, I will say this, that I appreciate everything that you shared, because everything that you just explained, now I haven't done a triathlon and a lot of these other things, but so much of what you just shared was so interesting to hear, because, you know, you said, I feel like I'm the one that's put together with duct tape, and I see everybody else and it looks like they're all put together. And even in a weird way, I think that's strangely reaffirming for myself to hear, and I think anybody watching or listening to this to hear, because I know we all feel like we are being held together by duct tape. Mm-hmm. Because 100%, like at the time of us recording this, full transparency, last couple of months for me have been like very like mentally and personally difficult. Mm-hmm. And that comes after a whole year of doing all this self-development and self-growth and self-love and all this sort of stuff that I was like excited for. And I was so excited to see what was going to be at the end of that tunnel once I got there, right? Started doing things that I never did before, started focusing on myself in new healthy ways, all these sort of things, making all these amazing accomplishments and feeling great along the way. And then when I felt like I had reached that new level, I had to kind of readjust to the fact of, oh, we're restarting at zero, and now there's all these new challenges. And maybe sometimes when you reach those points or those pinnacles, you don't get the results that maybe you thought you were going to. So it's like almost been difficult for me, not almost, it has been difficult for me to sit and be like, I just did all these great things, but I don't feel like the result that maybe I was looking for is what I got. But then I have to remind myself that the result was constant.
Right.
The result was all the change along the way. The result was the new form of me that I am now. And so it's reassuring in a strange way, even though it comes from a slightly negative place, to hear even you explain that. Because for me, I'm sitting here earlier before you got here, and I'm like, man, I've got Kathryn from Spritz coming on the show. Like, this is so sick. Like, this is so awesome. Like, genuinely, I was like, I didn't know if I would ever be able to get you on the show. I'm like, why would she sit down with me and talk about this thing? Like, I wonder if she will tell me about Spritz and all this sort of stuff. And so it's like, again,
we're real humans.
It's the perspectives.
Yeah.
We're all real humans.
We're real humans.
I projected this image of like, Spritz and Kathryn, and oh my gosh, I cannot believe she's giving me the time out of her day. And you're sitting here and you're telling me that like, yeah, there's a lot of difficult time in my day. And I see a bunch of other people that look like they have it together. And I think that just to kind of ball all that up, I love that you shared all that. I love the way that you even described it and described the feelings and those emotions. And I think it's all super, super valuable for everyone to hear, including myself. So I thank you for sharing all of that. And I am so very stoked that we got to make this happen.
Thank you.
And I'm so stoked that I got to hear the entire story of Spritz. So I have two last questions.
Okay.
One, you laid some of this out at the beginning. So we've projected some of it. But what are hopeful or planned or ongoing, stuff that you can obviously reveal, what's next for Spritz?
Yeah.
What's the next goals? What's the next, like, this is where we're headed, barring a pandemic?
Yes. Right now, me and my colleague, Kathryn Grogan, we are Kathryn and Kathryn, we are executing all of our planned tactics for our different channels and gathering data. So we are in analysis phase, which is great. I like analysis phase. And out of that, we will be able to then determine what kind of capital we need for expansion, and then how we want to get that capital, whether we want to pursue a debt financing or more likely an equity raise. That is the path right now. And I am trying very hard to stay focused on that. As we've got the plan, let's execute the plan, let's analyze the output, let's make the next plan. Because staying present and focused on that is is really all I can think I can mentally handle right now. So that's probably the big focus for us.
I love it. Also, there's been a strange theme of double names in your story. Have you caught on to Johnson & Johnson, Kristen and Kristen,
Kathryn and Kathryn.
Kathryn and Kathryn.
Oh, trust me, it gets worse. There's more.
Interesting.
Yeah, I can't. My first boyfriend's name was Dan, and my current boyfriend's name is Dan as well.
Okay.
I know,
So
it's frightening.
We're just finding
Yep.
all the double names
I know.
in this. I love it. So the final question that I have for you. I end every episode of this the exact same way with the exact same question.
Oh, good.
So you have already dropped so many amazing knowledge nuggets in this entire conversation. Like, so much of what you shared has been so valuable. I'm going to ask you to do it one more time. So right now, I want you to pretend like everyone in the world is listening to us talk. So you've got a live mic connected to everybody, and you get to share something with them. What is it that you would want everyone to hear?
Wow. Life is really hard sometimes, and that's how life is. Don't let that get you down. Focus at where you are, what you have, and what is the next small goal that you can achieve to move forward, and then give that all of your focus. We're all figuring this out together. None of us are perfect. None of us have it all together. Some of us act like we do. None of us actually do. No matter where you are, the past is the past. Take a deep breath. Assess what you have. Assess where you want to go. Find one small milestone and take a step forward.
That was wonderful.
Great.
Dude, thank you so very much for this is a 2-hour conversation. So I thank you so much for sitting down.
Well, you're great to talk with. So this has been lovely.
Good. Okay. I see that.
I told you this was not going to be a short session. We're very chatty.
And I told you at the beginning, I was like, listen, this is the place to storytell. This is the place to say everything you want to say. Couple last things to say. If anybody wants to go find Spritz or check it out online in the real world, plugs and promotions time.
Absolutely.
Where can they do it?
Yeah. So if you are in Columbus, Ohio or Cincinnati, the number one choice, of course, would be Kroger. Go support our Kroger pilot. You can find us in the bottled tea section of your Kroger stores. If you are not in the Columbus or Cincy divisions of Kroger, you can find us online, spritztea.com, SPRITZTEA.com. We do have a great starter kit on there. It's the 12 mixed pack, so you get to try all 4 flavors. The code TRYSPRITZ10 should get you 10% off your order. If not, feel free to DM us on Instagram and yell at me. I will find a correct code for you. And then on that note, Instagram, of course, we have lots of fun, I think very empowering content. We are at SpritzT on there as well. And you will also find a lot of mixology we do. We call it Spritzology. But as a non-alcoholic brand, we do feature a lot of non-alcoholic mixology with our products, so people can find fun ways to enjoy Spritz in a cocktail glass, a highball, wine glass, but in a non-alcoholic fashion. So those would be the 3 things I would say as a shout out. But that's it.
Perfect. Kathryn, thank you so much for doing this. Oh, and the last thing,
Yeah.
when's the orange juice, hot chocolate, milk
God.
flavor of Spritz dropping? We can let them know the date so they can look forward
So they
to
can
that.
know not to buy it.
So they can stay away from the
That'll go in the
stores.
annals of the Colgate beef lasagna fiasco.
Incredible. We did it. We made a podcast. That is it. Thank
All
you
right.
so very much.
Thank you.
We did it. That is
right.
it.
Woohoo!
So, another big thanks to Kathryn for being on the show and sharing everything that she did, sharing her story, being transparent and honest with so many parts of it, sharing some awesome advice, and all in all, just being a rad person that made for one of my favorite conversations that I have gotten to have on the show without a doubt. I had been wanting to meet Kathryn for a while, and especially wanted to get her story for the show, and it truly, truly did not disappoint. So I am so glad that we got to make it happen. Folks, I've said it before. having a podcast is indeed a cheat code to form many, many wonderful new friendships. So be sure to check out and support Spritz. You can follow them around the internet at Spritz Tea. That is Spritz with a Z, not an S. Or you can get all the info that you'd like on them at spritztea.com. Again, that is SPRITZTEA. Spritz Tea. So, as always, that'll be in the show notes, though, for easy, clickable links if you don't want to spell or type out Spritz with a Z if that's too difficult. You'll have the links down in the show notes that'll take you exactly to where I just told you to go. So you can check all that out. It's an awesome company created by a very awesome person. And you can be an awesome person, at least in my eyes, if you follow this show around social by finding us at WYDH Pod. Of course, you can further support by hopping over to iTunes or Apple Podcasts and toss us a rating and a review. Subscribe while you're there. Hop over to Spotify, find the follow button, hit that MFN thing like crazy. You can also leave ratings there now too. So toss us a 5-star if you liked what you heard. At the end of the day, though, the best thing that you can really do is just tell somebody about this show. So next time that a friend asks for a new podcast recommendation, maybe tell them about this one. So share these wonderful stories to more ears. Get them out there, whether it's by sharing this on your Instagram story or wherever you want, really. I don't care. Do whatever you want. You can take a selfie while you're listening to it and post that if you want. I don't know, maybe not while you're driving. I don't need some sort of a lawsuit with the show. I only have a couple sponsors at this point. I cannot handle or afford a lawsuit. So share it safely with somebody, whether you're sharing it on social or telling somebody about it. But realistically, in the end of everything, I will accept any and all forms of support. But let's wrap it up. That is another episode in the books. Thanks for listening. Thanks for looking. And as always, I'll be back next episode with a brand new guest that you may or may not know of, sharing their story that you for sure never heard.